they are at the moment facing a real crisis. Meghan and Harry's crisis, completely of their own making, is they have no major projects, no major money earners. And so they're more desperate than ever.
Well, Meghan herself.
And Meghan herself.
In the months before she met Harry, was setting up
the implosion of the Sussexes. Meghan Markle's Archewell charity scam and as ever lies have finally been exposed, an astonishing double blow for the fake Duchess.
Well, absolutely, but don't even believe that there were 5 options. What you really saw were Harry's and Meghan's fantasy narrative, which they call the truth.
She is hoping that she's going to become a billionaire.
Stop what you're doing for a second, because what Tom Bower just revealed about Meghan Markle's reported 2026 money situation is not something her PR team is eager to spotlight. We're talking about reports of $23 million worth of unsold jam sitting in storage, the Archewell Foundation flagged as delinquent in California filings before later addressing compliance issues, a Netflix project ranking far lower on the platform than expected, and a woman many believed was on track to billionaire status. Tom Bower has built a reputation for digging deep, and supporters say he's been consistent with his past predictions. What he's saying now about where this could all lead is raising eyebrows everywhere. Stay with me, because this story shifts from glossy headlines to some uncomfortable questions. Fast. Here's what people keep brushing off. They look at Prince Harry and Meghan and assume they're still comfortably wealthy. So what's the issue? But Bower isn't just talking about personal wealth. He's pointing to what he calls a larger unraveling, something he believes he forecast years ago. And now, according to his view, those cracks are becoming visible in ways that are harder to smooth over with branding or new announcements. Bower reportedly spent years researching the couple. He spoke with dozens of sources, including former staff.
Of all of this, which again is total insanity. I think the woman's expectations are so unrealistic.
And their problem is that they've got no future. I mean, as ever, all her product, of course, is a complete disaster. She's got no Netflix series. She hasn't got any project at all. And they are literally wallowing in a maze where to go. And so predictably.
Are they insane? What is happening? There is complete and utter chaos going on. The Meg and Harold are taking their rebrands far too literally at this point. Archewell, their charity effort, has not only changed its name from a foundation to philanthropies, which is even worse branding, I might add.
Royal insiders and Hollywood figures. The portrait he paints is dramatic, ambition on a massive scale, meeting the limits of public opinion and market reality. It's not just about numbers, it's about expectations versus outcomes. This is someone who stepped away from one of the most powerful institutions in the world, secured a reported 9-figure streaming deal, launched a lifestyle brand, established a charitable foundation, and announced bold plans to reshape conversations globally. The promise was transformation, influence, and long-term impact heading into 2026. Now, critics are asking whether those big dreams are colliding with tougher business realities. Supporters say setbacks happen to every brand. Detractors argue it's something deeper. Either way, the contrast between the original vision and today's headlines is impossible to ignore, and that's exactly why this conversation keeps getting louder. Tom Bower says he's looking at the numbers, not the headlines, and he believes the numbers tell a very different story. So let's walk through it carefully, because this is where the conversation gets serious. Start with the Archewell Foundation. When Harry and Meghan introduced it in 2020,
very clear that this restructuring is due to a lack of one very, very key thing, which is money. In fact, Harry and Meghan sold themselves to a dinner table at $100,000 a pop to raise money for Archewell.
Look, there's been leaked financial details from the Archewell Foundation. That's quite fascinating because it shows that there's 2 donors who've given one of them $15 million and one $3 million.
But Harry doesn't want to know any of that truth. That's the trouble with Harry. He just likes, because in his simple way, the paparazzi murdered my mother. Well, it wasn't as simple.
It was presented as a humanitarian mission built around compassion, service, and global change. It carried their son's name and was framed as a legacy project with purpose and heart. That was the public image. But Bauer argues the financial filings paint a more complicated picture. According to publicly available IRS Form 990 documents, Archewell reportedly received around $13 million in 2021, its third strongest year. That period also aligned with major commercial deals and publishing advances, so attention and funding were high. By 2024, however, reported donations had dropped to roughly $2.1 million, down from over $5 million the previous year. Meanwhile, total reported expenses for that same period were about $5.1 million. On paper, that means spending exceeded incoming donations for that year. Here's the part Bauer highlights most. Of the reported $5.1 million in expenses, about $1.25 million was listed as going directly to charitable grants. The remaining amount reportedly covered salaries, security, travel, and administrative operations. Security costs alone were said to be substantial. Now, it's important to say this clearly. Many large foundations carry administrative costs. That's not unusual in the nonprofit world. But critics argue that when a charity promotes itself as a major global humanitarian force,
even I would not have thought it'd be that accelerated. I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here. I think she has a major problem. And I think as of this week, the signal.
Expectations are higher. Optics matter, especially when Publix. Trust is part of the brand. There was also a compliance issue in California where the foundation was temporarily listed as delinquent for paperwork filing delays. That status was later addressed, but the notice raised eyebrows. For supporters, it was a paperwork mistake. For critics, it was another sign of instability. Staffing changes added more questions. At one point, Archewell reportedly had around 5 employees. By late 2024, that number had reportedly dropped to 2. Some staff departures were linked to restructuring and rebranding efforts. During that time, the website briefly went offline as part of updates. To some observers, that looked like normal transition. To others, it looked like damage control. Bauer calls this a pattern. When setbacks happen, messaging shifts, branding evolves, and the focus moves forward quickly. Whether that's smart crisis management or avoidance depends on who you ask. Now let's talk about the lifestyle brand As Ever. If Archewell is described as a slow financial squeeze, critics say As Ever was a high-risk commercial gamble. When the brand launched in April 2024, headlines celebrated that Meghan's jam sold out within hours. The launch created buzz, social media posts exploded, and it looked like instant success. But online observers noticed something interesting. By adjusting cart quantities on the website, some claimed they could estimate available inventory levels.
It was a Channel 5 investigation as to the state of the Sussexes' finances. Now, we know they didn't move to a 2-bedroom cottage somewhere in the middle of nowhere. They're living in quite a large mansion in Montecito. And one of the things that Prince Harry made very public when he left the royal family, one of the things that he was quite disgruntled about was the fact that his father basically cut him off financially. So really, they were in a state where they had to make a lot of money and a lot of money fast. He blundered in a video and said, the Netflix deal was an idea that was pitched to him.
Well, I do think the Sussex overdrive is
what a decline. How irrelevant they've become today. Do the Sussexes still pose an institutional risk, or are they now culturally sidelined?
I mean, an institutional risk to the British monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. A huge risk.
Really?
Absolutely. Because there's no doubt as they become more.
Based on those estimates, speculation grew that production numbers were far higher than initial sellout headlines suggested. Reports circulated claiming large quantities of fruit spread gift boxes, marmalades, candles, and other lifestyle items were still sitting in storage. Some online analysts estimated inventory values reaching into the tens of millions. Those figures have not been independently confirmed, but they fueled major discussion. Sales velocity became part of the debate. Critics claimed that daily sales numbers appeared low compared to total stock. If accurate, that would suggest a long road to clear inventory, especially for perishable goods with shelf life limits. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that product rollouts often scale gradually and that inventory buildup can be strategic. One reviewer compared the jam to common grocery store brands despite its premium price point. That critique spread quickly online. In the luxury market, repeat customers matter more than curiosity buyers. If buyers try once and don't return, momentum fades fast. Bauer's argument is blunt. He suggests the initial sold-out narrative may have involved limited early releases designed to create hype.
Are so draconian, so watertight, that nobody dares sell their story. I mean, that is what's quite astonishingly clever of Meghan and her lawyers, to protect their reputation and all the dreadful things that have happened in Montecito behind the high walls. But my book reveals a bit more about that, my future book. But that's a tease.
Again, that tactic isn't uncommon in modern marketing. Scarcity drives headlines. Headlines drive attention. Attention can drive investment. But attention does not always equal long-term demand. There's also discussion about streaming partnerships tied to the brand. Observers say support from Netflix for As Ever appears limited compared to earlier high-profile announcements. Whether that reflects strategic shifts or simple business recalibration isn't fully clear. What makes this situation compelling isn't just the dollar amounts. It's the contrast between the original promise and the current scrutiny. Meghan positioned herself as a global changemaker and lifestyle entrepreneur, ready to dominate multiple industries. That's an ambitious vision. When results appear uneven, the gap becomes headline material. To supporters, this is a woman building businesses under intense public pressure, facing amplified criticism at every turn. To critics like Bauer, it's a case study in overreach, branding ahead of fundamentals, and ambition colliding with financial gravity. The truth likely sits somewhere between those extremes. What's undeniable is that public filings, inventory speculation, staffing shifts, and brand performance are all being analyzed more closely than ever. In today's digital world, every number gets screenshotted, every ranking gets tracked, and every compliance notice becomes a viral thread. And once that level of scrutiny kicks in, narratives are harder to control. They weren't willing to gamble serious money on something that uncertain.
I do think the problem with Meghan is that she never actually says anything in interviews. It is so carefully controlled, so carefully chosen what she's going to say that she says really pretty well nothing. Now, is it because she's got nothing to say, or is it because she is fearful that if she did move off the benign script, she would actually get into real trouble? I think it's the latter. She's clever enough to know that to retain her mystery and status, she should reveal nothing about.
The early sold-out headlines created excitement in the press, but buzz doesn't always translate into loyal, repeat buyers. That's the difference critics keep pointing out. Curiosity can spark a launch, but it rarely builds a lasting customer base on its own. Tom Bauer uses a sharp phrase to describe what he believes Netflix is doing right now: slow ghosting. The reported 9-figure deal that was once framed as a creative revolution has, in his view, shifted into something much quieter. Netflix did not move forward with another season of With Love, Meghan. And as Bauer notes, what was presented as multiple installments was essentially one season divided into parts. The rankings tell part of the story. Reports circulated that with Love, Meghan landed far down the platform's overall performance charts, with its holiday special ranking even lower. For a personality with global name recognition, a major production budget, and worldwide media coverage, expectations were high. When viewership didn't match that hype, critics started asking hard questions. Bauer's interpretation is blunt. He argues the content lacked originality and emotional depth, suggesting it felt overly polished rather than authentic. Meghan was often compared to lifestyle icons like Martha Stewart, but instead of groundbreaking homemaking inspiration, some viewers felt they were watching carefully staged visuals that didn't connect on a deeper level. Behind the scenes, Bauer claims production sources described intense attention to on-camera image and presentation. He suggests that focus may have limited spontaneity.
Get into the details of this, Brittany, because the details here matter, given that everything Harry and Meghan do is topspin, trying to convince the world, and very often the mainstream media are sucked in, that everything's okay, but it's really not. And the first revelation in regards to Archewell is that the charity is down to just 2 staffers.
Not Harry and Meghan.
And warmth. In lifestyle programming, relatability is everything. When an audience senses performance instead of personality, engagement drops fast. According to Bauer, streaming executives may have recognized early on that the series wasn't generating sustained interest. He suggests the remaining development agreement functions more like a quiet step back than a bold renewal. In entertainment terms, it's not cancellation with fireworks, it's distance without drama. While questions about streaming performance were unfolding in California, Prince Harry was in a London courtroom dealing with his own legal battle. He testified in a lawsuit against a major newspaper publisher over alleged phone hacking, dating back to the early 2000s. During testimony, emotions ran high. At one point, he became visibly upset while speaking about the impact media coverage has had on his wife. Observers noted that much of the case focused on events from years before Meghan entered his life. Still, Harry's testimony reflected how strongly he connects past press experiences to present family stress. Courtroom exchanges grew tense enough that the judge reminded him to focus on answering questions directly rather than engaging in back-and-forth arguments. Legal analysts say these cases can be unpredictable and potential costs can climb significantly depending on the outcome. Critics argue the public display reinforced a perception of emotional strain. Supporters counter that challenging powerful media institutions comes with pressure, and emotional testimony isn't unusual in personal legal disputes. Meanwhile, Meghan remained in California, continuing public and online activity.
The security bill alone said to be around $2 million a year, with money flowing out of the charity. So Archewell actually recorded total expenses of $5.1 million, according to its latest 990 form. Salaries for 2024 were listed at $913,000. Expenses were up 54% year on year, soaring from $3.3 million.
While her husband navigated the courtroom process overseas, for commentators like Bauer, that contrast symbolized what he sees as an imbalance in public roles and messaging. Others see it as simple logistics. Two adults managing separate responsibilities in different countries. Bauer's broader thesis is that Harry's public identity has increasingly centered around defending and amplifying Meghan's narrative. Whether that's loyalty, influence, or partnership depends on perspective. But the imagery of a prince in court under pressure, while lifestyle branding continues at home, became powerful for critics analyzing their dynamic. Now layer in the financial angle. Bauer has suggested that maintaining their current lifestyle, security, property costs, staff, travel, and business operations requires enormous capital over the long term. Estimates circulating among commentators range into the hundreds of millions when projecting decades forward. That doesn't mean immediate crisis, it means sustainability becomes a central question. High-profile deals create expectations. When revenue streams fluctuate, charitable donations dip, product lines face inventory questions, streaming performance softens, scrutiny intensifies, every business decision gets magnified, every legal bill becomes part of the conversation. Supporters argue reinvention is normal in entertainment. Projects succeed, others underperform, and new opportunities emerge. Critics argue there's a pattern of overpromising and underdelivering. Both sides agree on one thing:
aspect of their charity has essentially collapsed completely, and it's been revealed for what it really always was, which is a publicity stunt. They were completely and utterly willing to throw aside the people they were supposed to help, and now we have the situation where it's all their art. It's just artifice. It's just there for show, and Harry and Meghan just don't have a lot of hope going into 20.
The spotlight isn't dimming anytime soon. The phrase slow ghosting resonates because it captures a subtle shift rather than a dramatic fall. No explosive announcements, no public confrontations, just quieter momentum. Whether this chapter becomes a temporary reset or a larger turning point depends on what happens next. New content, new partnerships, or a recalibration of scale. But right now, the combination of legal tension, streaming questions, and financial projections has created a narrative critics believe is catching up in real time. And in the modern media landscape, once perception shifts, turning it back around takes more than headlines. It takes results. Here's where Tom Bauer says the real pressure starts to show. Not in the headlines, not in the interviews, but in the lifestyle, math. Because according to Bauer, this isn't just about one slow-performing show or one product line that didn't hit projections. It's about scale. The Montecito mansion, the private security teams, the staff, the travel, the legal battles, the PR operations. That level of living isn't just expensive, it's relentlessly expensive. Bauer argues that maintaining that image long-term requires extraordinary capital. Not a few successful years, not one major streaming contract. We're talking hundreds of millions in sustainable liquidity over decades. That's a completely different category of wealth. That's dynastic-level security. And critics say the couple never quite reached that tier. When they stepped away from royal duties, the narrative was bold and confident. Financial independence, creative freedom.
$9 million. Meanwhile, donations and grants to the group dipped from $5.3 million in 2023 to $2.1 million in 2024. Insiders skeptical of how Archewell, which doled out $1.25 million in grants in 2024, can continue. The source said if they're shooting out grants, then that's a net loss and they're not bringing in that much money.
It really is, Dan. And one of the things is that Harry and Meghan have always said service is universal. They're going to be doing charity in the States and all these things. And it's just completely and utterly false. It was just a lie from the very face of it. And we've seen this endlessly. Meghan praises herself constantly for being this great humanitarian.
Global influence, a modern power couple building an empire in California. The optics were sleek, the contracts were headline-grabbing, the momentum looked unstoppable. But Bauer believes the structure underneath was always more fragile than it appeared. Large advances aren't the same as recurring revenue. Big announcements don't automatically create long-term cash flow, and public fascination does not guarantee stable business performance. He points to a pattern: initial splash, heavy promotion, global interviews, then quieter results. The podcast deal, the streaming content, the lifestyle launch. Each moment arrived with massive coverage. But critics argue that sustained audience retention has been inconsistent. And here's the uncomfortable part. When brand identity is built around moral authority and cultural commentary, business setbacks hit differently. If you position yourself as transformative, the public expects transformation. If you market authenticity, the audience looks for transparency. When those expectations aren't met, disappointment spreads fast. Meanwhile, public opinion appears more divided than ever. Some supporters still see Meghan as a disruptor unfairly scrutinized. They argue that no project would ever satisfy critics determined to see failure. Others believe the scrutiny is the natural result of high-profile exits, explosive interviews.
Well, I go further than that. I mean, all those things can be excusable as youth and all the rest of it. But the support of Meghan in her full story about the conversation, which was banter, and I know that from first hand, and was really inconsequential, to support that, that was his act of folly.
And global accusations aimed at institutions. Bauer's view leans firmly toward overreach. He suggests ambition outpaced infrastructure. He believes the couple underestimated how quickly public sympathy can cool once commercial ventures become the focus. The shift from royal rebels to California entrepreneurs changed the lens through which audiences view them. There's also the reputational cost of constant repositioning. One year, it's documentary storytelling. The next, it's inspirational speaking, then lifestyle branding, then legal crusades. Reinvention can be powerful, but too much pivoting can create confusion about core identity, and confusion weakens loyalty. Industry insiders often say Hollywood values consistency. Executives invest in creators who deliver repeatable performance. If projects don't hit internal benchmarks, enthusiasm fades quietly. Not with drama, not with press conferences, just fewer green lights. Bauer believes that's exactly what's happening. No explosive cancellation headlines, just fewer expansions, fewer renewals, fewer visible escalations. At the same time, legal costs remain unpredictable. High-profile lawsuits aren't just about principle. They involve teams of lawyers, research, hearings, appeals. Even strong cases can become financially draining over time. If outcomes don't fully align with expectations, the bill can grow quickly. Add that to operating costs in California, and the runway becomes a serious topic. Now, here's where things get more complex. Public perception feeds commercial opportunity. If audiences view someone as influential, brands want association. If audiences sense instability, partnerships become cautious.
That Harry and Meghan, when they do have a camera in front of them and when they are in a position to communicate with the public, they're not promoting that charity. They're typically complaining about what's going on in their lives or what happened 4 years ago. So people don't know that there's an opportunity there to collaborate.
Reputation isn't just emotional, it's economic. And critics argue that reputational volatility has become the central challenge. Bauer has long claimed that narrative control was their strongest tool. Strategic interviews, carefully framed documentaries, highly produced visuals. But in the age of social media analysis, every data point gets examined, every ranking gets tracked, every financial filing gets dissected. The environment is different now. It's less about grand statements and more about measurable outcomes. There's also the personal dimension. Harry's visible emotion in court contrasted sharply with Meghan's continued brand activity. Supporters call that division of labor. Critics call it imbalance. Either way, it reinforced public debate about leadership inside the partnership. Bauer argues that Harry's identity has increasingly intertwined with defending shared narratives rather than building independent initiatives. Whether that's loyalty or influence depends on perspective, but the optics matter, and optics drive. Headlines. The larger question isn't whether they still have money. Of course they do. The question is sustainability. Can high-profile deals be replaced at the same scale? Can brand extensions generate repeat revenue? Can public goodwill be rebuilt or stabilized? Because lifestyle at that level doesn't pause, security doesn't get cheaper, property taxes don't shrink, staff costs don't disappear. Bauer's most striking point isn't about collapse in a dramatic sense. It's about erosion, slow, incremental, harder to reverse once momentum turns. Supporters believe reinvention is still possible. A compelling documentary, a best-selling project, a major philanthropic breakthrough. Hollywood is full of second acts.
The days of the launch of that business was connected to the scarcity strategy, which meant that virtually no product was put on sale, right? So that it would sell out. And so that she got the good headlines, or what she thought was the good headlines. But now, the true extent of the stock available for As Ever has been.
Critics believe credibility, once strained, is expensive to restore. And that's where the 2026 conversation begins. Not with bankruptcy headlines, not with dramatic endings, but with a recalibration question. Are they building something durable? Or are they sustaining something expensive? Because those are two very different strategies. Right now, the signals appear mixed. Public attention remains intense, but attention alone doesn't secure longevity. Deliverables do. If Bauer is right, this isn't about a single failed product or a single underperforming show. It's about structural tension between image and infrastructure, between projection and performance. And when projection runs ahead of performance for too long, gravity eventually shows up. The next moves will matter more than any press release. New content, new partnerships, new measurable wins. Because in an industry built on perception, perception shifts fast. And once it shifts, maintaining the same altitude requires more than headlines. It requires results. Now we get to the part Tom Bauer says people don't want to look at directly. The long-term math. Prince Harry's personal net worth is widely estimated between $35 and $40 million. That is not small money. That is not struggling. But critics argue it's not enough to comfortably sustain a California estate, private security, staff, legal battles, travel, and high-profile branding for decades without steady, large income streams flowing in. And that's the key word, steady. The streaming momentum appears quieter. Spotify ended its partnership years ago. Questions continue around the scale of future Netflix projects.
That's seemingly what the math says, as an error in her As Ever website allows customers to not only see the entire amount in stock, but purchase them to the tune of over $5 million. This gives the greatest insight to the failure of As Ever so far, and the continued failure of Meghan Markle to manage products, websites, and brands, as
Ever reportedly holds large amounts of unsold, perishable inventory. Archewell has faced compliance scrutiny and reduced donations compared to peak years. Each issue alone might be manageable. Together, critics say, they create pressure. One reported fundraising move especially caught attention, auctioning dinner access at $100,000 per seat to support Archewell. Supporters would call that creative philanthropy. Bauer interprets it differently. He argues that when access becomes the product, the aura of exclusivity shifts into something transactional. That interpretation fuels his broader point. Brand value depends on perception of demand. If the public senses overexposure or financial urgency, prestige weakens. Then there's security. Harry has been vocal about wanting publicly funded security while in the United Kingdom. Officially, the argument centers on safety and risk assessments. Bauer believes there may be a strategic layer beneath that regaining formal UK relevance could reopen certain doors. including reconciliation dynamics with King Charles. It's important to state clearly, there is no confirmed evidence that financial support is the primary motive behind reconciliation efforts. But Bauer suggests financial realities inevitably shape strategic decisions at this level of public life. Reports indicate King Charles has maintained firm boundaries regarding financial independence. Despite emotional courtroom references to family and grandchildren, there have been no confirmed changes to funding arrangements. That standoff has symbolic weight because the larger narrative is about independence. They left to be financially autonomous. If autonomy becomes financially strained, critics argue the story starts to shift. Bauer also raises another sensitive point: monetization of royal proximity. Every speaking engagement, every interview, every future project, even when critical, they still derive value from royal association. The institution remains central to their commercial identity. They say they stepped away, but the brand remains linked. And here's where Bauer's long-standing warning comes into focus. Years ago, he argued that building a public identity primarily around grievance or victimhood carries a shelf life. Emotional engagement fades over time. Outrage cools, fascination declines. What replaces anger is something quieter: indifference. In 2026, the headlines don't burn the way they once did. The explosive interviews are no longer new. The shock factor has softened. What remains are measurable outputs: inventory numbers, viewership rankings, donation figures, legal transcripts. Critics point to reported unsold fruit spread inventory. They point to courtroom footage. They point to compliance notices. They see a trajectory. Supporters see resilience under extraordinary scrutiny. They see attempts at reinvention. They see a couple navigating pressures most public figures would never survive. The truth likely lives somewhere between narrative and number. But perception is powerful. If Bauer's track record means anything to his followers, they believe this isn't a sudden collapse. It's a slow shift, a recalibration, a brand at a crossroads. The next chapter matters more than any retrospective debate. Will there be a major creative rebound, a defining documentary, a successful relaunch, or a quieter scaling back into more focused projects? Because sustaining that level of visibility requires more than headlines. It requires momentum that converts into measurable return. Right now, the conversation isn't about whether they once had leverage. It's about whether they still do. And that's why this story continues to generate discussion. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is a temporary setback or a long-term turning point? Like this video if you found it insightful, share it with someone following the story, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. See you on the next one.